Failure is not an option. How many times have you heard it? However, even the best have failed. This is Fail, Inspiring Resilience, where we celebrate stories of vulnerabilities, adversities, and strength, shared by exceptional people to create a more resilient society. Because failure is indeed not an option, it is required to succeed.
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are. We hope that you and your family are staying safe and healthy. My name is Richard John. I'm a PhD student at MIT Mathematics, and I'm one of the co-founders of FAIL.
Hello, everybody. My name is Francesco Benedetti, and I'm a postdoctoral associate at MIT, and I'm also one of the co-founders of FAIL.
Welcome to another live chat with FAIL, where failures are not being shied away, but rather being celebrated. Am I correct, Francesco?
Yes, absolutely correct, Richard. So in fact, FAIL is an initiative for those who are here for the first time and are attending one of our events for the first time. FAIL is an initiative that was started in early 2018 at MIT, where we started this initiative to basically destigmatize failure and bring psychological safety in every environment, starting from the workplace to schools. And we do believe that it is possible to create a more resilient society by changing the way we tell our stories, which means not just sharing what was the success of our story, but sharing also those moments that we usually hide because we are not proud of them, because we think they're gonna not play well in our career path, etc., but really define who we are and can tell a lot about ourselves. So we really want to create a platform for this. And so welcome everybody to another event live together at home.
Yes, and this is a live event where we will be conduct moderated interviews with a speaker. You will also have the chance to interact indirectly with the speaker by leaving your questions and comments throughout the event. So if you have anything you want to ask, feel free to add them to the chat, whichever platform you're on, whether it be Facebook or YouTube. And at the end of the chat, we'll leave some time to address your questions. So if you ask questions, make sure you stay till the end.
Absolutely, and you are absolutely encouraged to ask questions because the speaker that we have today, our special guest, is Gretchen Gerzina, and she's amazing. She's a professor of biography and professor of English at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. I'm still not able to pronounce Massachusetts correctly, even though I'm here for 3 years. She has a degree from Stanford University, and at Dartmouth, Gretchen was the first African-American woman to chair an Ivy League English department. In 2017, she was also elected to the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. And as an author, she wrote 10 plus books. And Gretchen was also a radio host for 15 plus years, and a radio series, Britain's Black Past, aired on BBC Radio. So, and last but not least, Gretchen is really an extremely inspiring woman. And she's also has an Italian passport, which really makes me proud. So welcome, Gretchen. Welcome to this our event. How you feel today?
I'm fine. I'm still waiting for you to teach me Italian better than I do already.
No. You teach English, so you know the grammar. You can pick languages up. I'm so bad. Like I can't teach you anything. But we can speak Italian definitely if you want.
No, I don't want to try.
Okay. So this event will still be hosted in English. All right, everybody agrees. All right. So prego, Gretchen. So basically, Gretchen was supposed to be one of our keynote speaker at the late event in March that was supposed to happen live in person, not live, of course, live in person at MIT in March. But that was one of the 5 events that we had to cancel because the pandemic started. So Gretchen, you really experienced in person this transition between before when everything was normal and after, when we're still in the situation that we're still today. So I think everybody is asking, how did you manage this transition before and after the pandemic, and how sad you are that you didn't have a chance actually to speak at an in-person fail event in front of 600 people, and now you have just Richard and I on the call.
Well, first of all, I was really looking forward to having dinner with you afterwards. So we can. I was looking forward to when you give a talk. One of the nicest things is you get to give the talk. You get to see who's in the audience. You get to read the audience and see their faces, and then you get to go have dinner and a glass of wine with the people who were with you. And that part I miss. It was actually an interesting time because I was the dean of the Honors College at UMass. And I was getting close to the end of my term when all of a sudden, bang, this happened. And I went from hours and hours of meetings every day to hours and hours of meetings every day on Zoom, and eye strain and all those things you don't think about. And the hours that sort of 5 o'clock doesn't mean anything anymore when you're still doing that. So I went through that for several months, and then I had planned already, and I went back into the faculty. So now I'm teaching online students that I've never met in person. So
right.
Yeah, all of that is a little different.
And that must be very hard, right? Like when you're teaching with somebody that you really want to create a connection with, but through a camera, it must be very hard. Like I cannot even imagine how it feels. Maybe Richard can relate to it since he had some teaching experience after the pandemic started.
Yeah, I taught over the summer, and I've still haven't met my students. I've worked with them for 3 months, and it's really hard because you don't get to judge the reactions of the students. You don't get to pick up the nonverbal cue. So sometimes I tell my students, if you don't understand anything, just tell me to shut up, and because I wasn't doing my job correctly.
Well, fortunately, my classes are very small, so they take up a bit more space on the screen, each person. And that helps a lot. Although you do get to see things like there's stuffed animals on the bed and things that the cats that walk across the screen. I kind of like that part.
Exactly. Yeah, Richard, feel free to go.
Yeah. So, Gretchen, so I'm sure you had a lot more rich stories that you would be able to tell in the in-person format. So, to the extent possible, what you share with some of the failure stories that you were going to tell in person during the March meeting?
Yeah, I mean, I have some big stories, but I thought I would kind of lead up to them a little bit because I was thinking hard. I mean, I have a big one that really kind of I thought was derailing me in some way, in terms of my career and my personal life. But I wanted to start off by saying that I was one of those kids who always did well at school, and I had no idea what I wanted to be. I had at least 10 things I wanted to be when I grew up. And I was expecting that I would continue to be good at everything. And I think some of that came, oddly enough, it's counterintuitive, but the fact that I'm biracial helped me. Other people didn't feel that way. Other people feel, people used to look at me and say, well, you're neither here nor there. I had teachers say that to me, you don't know who you are. And I said, well, actually, I do think I do. But it was, I always thought, I can be everything. I can be anything I want to be. I can always be good at it. I'll just give you a quick little story. When I first moved to Massachusetts, I grew up in Springfield. I will say that I moved away when I was 18, as far as I could. I've lived in, I think, 5 states and 3 countries. So, I got around. But we moved into our house when I was just before I turned 5. And one of the things my sister and I, as we went through this house, looking around, we discovered in one of the drawers was this. Now this is, wow. And now it got a little mouse eaten over the years, but I've saved her because she's called a Topsy-Turvy Doll. And what happens is you turn them inside out. and there's the white woman.
Oh my
No.
gosh.
And they're called Topsy-Turvy Dolls, and they were done in lots of ways. I don't think I'd ever seen one with the white mistress and the black servant with the head wrap. And so I've kept her safe all these years, but I often thought the interesting thing about this is that I felt like both of them. And what does that mean in terms of what I want to be when I grow up? Do I have to try to be the lady? Do I have to be the person who's holding it together? So it was an interesting time, but I grew up thinking that I had to be good at everything. I remember my mother couldn't cook. So my father taught me how to cook when I was 6 on a chair, standing in front of the stove. And I remember
Italian, of course.
yeah, now my father was African American. My mother's German American. My husband's Italian, so that's where I get the passport. But I thought, oh, I can be a dancer, I can be a doctor, I can be a gymnast. But the pressures that come with that, being good at things and being ambitious, are that everybody expects so much of you, and they don't expect you to do badly at anything. And it to the extent that I remember when I was in 6th grade, we had to do the big national test, and they read the scores out loud to our classes. And we had 2 classes that were in the same building back to back, so that we were always competing with each other. Mm-hmm. And there was a girl in the other class, and she was a white girl. I was in this class, and they read the scores out, and the teacher just kept smiling. And then he read the other girl's scores. And everybody started cheering, and they said, Gretchen beat her. She got, and I went, oh no, this is going to be so embarrassing. Do I have to do this like for the rest of my life? All I did was take this test with my pencil. So anyway, by the time I got to high school, I didn't want necessarily to be that girl anymore. And when it came time to take the PSAT tests that you take the year before you take the SATs, Francesca, you didn't have to do any of that. I didn't want to take it. I did not want to do this test. Wasn't sure what I wanted to be or do. So I actually spent the whole time in the test figuring out the right answer to every question and then putting the wrong answers in so that I would fail the test, which I did quite well. I was very proud of myself because it meant that I figured out all the right answers. And then my mother found out, and my father found out, and my high school counselor found out, and they brought me into the office, and it was awful. And I was very proud, but they allowed me to take it off of my record because they were afraid that I would fail and not go to college because of that act of rebellion. So there are lots of ways to think that you're pushed to do things that you don't necessarily want to do because you're not sure who you are. I went on then to go to the wrong college because my counselor said, well, you can go here, but you're eligible to go here because you've won some awards. But I suggest you not go to those. You should go to this one, which is the one that anybody could get into. And so I got very angry, of course, and I said no, and I didn't go to any of them. And I picked a college just because I had a friend there, and I thought, okay, I'll go there. It was terrible, terrible choice. It was racially fraught. I failed everything. And they made me take a test when I dropped out. And I failed because I got incompletes and I didn't finish them because I knew I was going to leave. And they made me take a test, and they reported back to me that my only option in life was to join the military. So I didn't do that. I transferred to the right college. And right before I went, my mother had a good friend who lived in Paris who was visiting. And she said, I know you've always wanted to live in Europe. I know you're very good at French. Why don't you come live with me for a year? And you could teach English to students and you could live in Paris. And I said, ooh, neat. No, I'm going to go to this college instead. What a mistake that was. What a stupid thing I did. So I sometimes look back at my life of all the decisions I've made, all the things I thought were the right thing to do. I thought it was the mature thing to go to college. I didn't think I could take a gap year, which I could have. And I sometimes think of my life as a series of bad decisions. They all ended up fine, but there are many things that I still regret that I chose simply because I thought it was a nice thing to do, or it was the right thing to do, or it would please somebody else. And I thought those were my first big failures. I sold a house that we had built that I loved. I dream about it every night because I thought my husband wanted to sell it. He didn't want to sell it, but we sold it a week later and it's gone. He went into a store in town as we were doing the closing, and a woman in the store said, "Oh, my sister just bought this wonderful house." And he came home and he said, "I just heard the funniest story." And I just burst into tears and I said, no. She bought my house. Don't give it back. So, I have a nice long list of mistakes I made, bad decisions. I went on to graduate school with 2 children. They were 18 months and 5 years old. I was the only person of color in my year at Stanford. I was the only person with children, I think. Maybe one other had children. And I worked really hard. I wanted to be everything for everybody. And at the end of the first year, or it's the beginning of the second year, the end of my first year, I failed my comps and my comprehensive exams. And so that to me just was a blow. I had moved the family across the country. I had said I was going to do wonderful things. I brought my children there, brought my husband there, and I failed. It was dreadful. I felt, I don't know how one gets over these things, except that you put another step forward. And then the next year I passed them beautifully. But for that time, I couldn't see a way out. I couldn't see, how do you get past this? How do you, what other options do I have in life now? Because I did the big gamble and I failed. So I'm here to tell you that I did pass. I did go on. I did have a career, but it was devastating at the time. I thought you might like to know 1 or 2 other things before we go on.
Yeah, absolutely. This is amazing for us to hear. I think there's so much going on. I'm just very happy. Please continue.
Okay, so I think I think looking back, I'd like to say that I didn't take enough time for myself because I thought I had to be all these things. I would get really tired. My doctors would tell me I was a type A. They would tell me I had too much stress. And I would take jobs. People ask me to do something. I always say yes. And I shouldn't. And, there were things I wanted to do that I didn't do. And I got very weary, I think. And I often want to tell students, I actually talk to my students a lot and tell them, you need to sleep at night. You need to get some exercise. You need to eat a little bit better than you're eating right now. And I tell them this from experience. I'm lucky enough. I come from a family where the men do the cooking. So even though I learned how to cook and I can do it, this is a helpful thing. The men like to cook and I'm happy to let them do it. But I want to tell the students to have a life. I remember somebody telling me, a famous writer we'll talk about later, said when students wanted to stay home stay on campus for Thanksgiving because they had work to do. Mm-hmm. And the parents wanted them to go home. And sometimes they would fly across the country for a weekend. It didn't seem to make any sense. And this writer said to me, Thanksgiving is just a meal. But it looms large. It looms large for people. So, I think people need to take time. I think Thanksgiving is a wonderful time. People should spend time with families. Now, this is a hard time because we can't do that. And I'm a little sad about that. And, I get emails from relatives who are sad about it. And so, I want to say, take the time while you've got the time. Enjoy it. Absolutely. So here's the last thing I want to say, just to throw something in there. When I get upset, when I get depressed, when I think I have too much on my plate, I iron. I love to iron. I iron all our sheets. I hang them outside. I iron my clothes. Half the people I know don't even own one. And I just say, how can you not? This is like the best therapy in the world. And then you open your closet and all the sheets are stacked up. And they look so nice, and and they smell good if you hang them outside. So that's my little secret. People are going to be surprised to know that about me. I'm very domestic.
No, Gretchen, I think you said a lot of things we could relate from like previous talks that we had. For instance, the very last thing that you said, like also Muriel Amedar, the professor that spoke at one live interview like almost 2 months ago. She said it's really in the small things that she finds, the happiness, and that you would never think of, that they would give you so much back, or just try to appreciate the small things. But something as important that you said is like, and I relate to it so much, and I think most of the people that are watching, like, we always try to please everybody. We always try to think that we need to over deliver. We have this sense of we are insecure, and we need to do always 150%, or give 150% of ourselves to please people. And we think that just if we do that, we can achieve what we want and move on in life. Daniel Jackson said that we need to learn how to say no, because otherwise we just kill ourselves, like sometimes, like unfortunately, literally. So it's very, very, very bad. But something else that I think, like in your story, I really felt like you changed many times. Okay, you moved in so many different towns and so many different countries and cities, and this really connects to how Fail started. Like, Fail was started by a lot of visiting students, okay, that came to MIT from everywhere in the world, and they flew thousands of miles to be there and to achieve their dreams, to make them coming true, okay? And it's just the product. Fail is the product of so much hope and so much desire to change things, of people that are willing to take everything, move in another country, and try to get that dream. So, like, I think the question that I have for you is, what gives people the strength to leave everything and just go and just try?
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to do it, especially if you do it alone. I was lucky because I had family. I'm not sure I probably would have even moved more often if I didn't have family. But that has been the constant for me, is to have somebody, something, some people in my life who are the constants. Whether you live with them or not, you're not always by yourself in some way. I always think it's going to be all right. And then the minute I've made the decision, then I think, oh, this is going to be bad. This is going to be terrible. I've made a big mistake. And I think the thing that keeps you going is that you try to do it a day at a time. I moved, I lived in London for several years, and I moved to California, and people thought I was a single parent because I went with my kids before my husband got there. And I thought, I'm all by myself in this place. I would walk into classrooms and think, why did I do this? So I think it's really important to have something that grounds you, even when you put all of your eggs in one basket. When you say, I'm going to move from another country and go to MIT, and then I can't even be in person with people. You've got to find something that keeps you going, so that it just isn't just the work itself. The work is hopefully something that gives you pleasure, gives you joy and satisfaction, but it also is a source of frustration, and just keep at it. I mean, I wrote one of my books 5 times because the editor kept saying it wasn't good enough. And that was a long stretch of doing that. So yeah, I think you're particularly in a place that's very full of people who have done that, who move a lot. You've done it. So yes, I mean, was it scary?
I think for me it was scary sometimes, but it was always stronger, the desire of trying to make like something more of my life and everything. Not that I was never unhappy with what I have. I was always something that was making me happy at every stage of my life, I think. But I always been extremely curious. And I think I always wanted to try something else. And, that really took me here, I guess. Like, also something that I can relate, like when you say, were you scared? Like, for instance, the same approach is to speak in public for me. You would never tell, but I'm extremely shy. Like I struggled to talk to people for like until I was kind of 18. I was really 18 or 20. I was struggling to talk to many people. I'm just shy, very shy. But that was really preventing me to do so many things that I wanted to do, right? To experience so many great stuff around, with people and around the world. So I said, no, I'm not gonna let it stop me. And I need to force myself. I need to improve. I need to get better. I need to be less shy. I need to be more confident. And it's a lot of struggle. Like I am so emotional also right now, like talking here in front of people. But it's so important to do this. And it's like, let's do it. It's more important to do it rather than just be afraid of doing it and eventually giving up.
So failing then is not having the courage to try something, rather than trying something and maybe not doing so well at it. It's a bigger failure not to even try.
You got it, exactly. Like the fear of failure, the fear, like what prevents you to even try. Like if you don't even try because you're afraid of failing, it's probably the biggest failure.
Yeah. And that's the thing that will haunt you if you
Absolutely.
don't.
And that's what we're that's one of the main reasons as to why we're doing this initiative, is to encourage people to keep on trying. Don't just give up so early because you are afraid of failing.
Right.
And exactly like you said, the fear of failure is a bigger failure on its own than if you give your best shot and then it didn't work out.
It's always better. It's always better to try. Yes.
Absolutely. And Gretchen, I want to return to one of the other things that you mentioned, in your failure stories. At some point, you mentioned that you want to be many, many things. You want to be many people. And I definitely relate to that, in the sense that I have so many different interests. I'm a mathematician now, and at some point I could equally likely be a philosopher, be a psychoanalyst, and be an English minor, be an English major. I was very close to declaring myself an English major when I was during my undergrad. And I think having options is a great position to be in. It's a privileged position to be in. Many people in this world don't have options. They were born with under a very challenging circumstance, and they don't have many options around them. But for many young professionals that we've been interfacing, having an option is a blessing and a curse. And certainly for you, you felt you didn't know what to do. You felt that you were facing too many choices. So I just want to get your opinions on, how should people go about choosing, and how should young professionals, when they're at their early stage in their career, deal with the myriad of options that can have various implications, years down the road?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I will say that when I left college and first started to get a master's degree and to do other things, it was really when the women's movement was really kicking in. And I felt that there were certain things I had to do because of that there was a kind of person I needed to be, which was fine. I didn't mind that. But there were people who told me, you should not be an English major. You should go into business, because that's where women should go. They should have this other option to do something different. I actually was accepted into an MBA program because I was pushed to do that. And they said, oh, all women, they become English majors, they read books, and then they go home and have kids. Well, I already had kids. I mean, they just started coming early. But I didn't want to work in a bank. I didn't mind the money that you might make, but I just knew in my heart that I was going to do that because somebody else thought it was the right thing for me to do, because I could make a mark for other people, for women of color. My parents blessedly did not push me into a career. And I think that's a big thing I see students facing now, is that there are things that they know in their heart are the right thing for them to do, that they can succeed at. But there's a lot of fear that they're not just carrying, but the fear that comes from their families as well, who are afraid for them to not succeed. And that's a very difficult, it's a really difficult position to be in. A lot of them that I see come and they decide, this is, I think, the source of all the double and triple majoring now is, there's one for themselves and one for their parents. And I've had so many students who said, I can't, it's too selfish of me to try to do the thing that I want to do. And that's a heavy burden. And it's especially a heavy burden if you come from a family that's sacrificing for you to get you where you are. How can you say, no, you got me here and I don't want to do that? That's, you feel you owe them. And that's a huge thing. I don't want to discount the importance of being part of a family. At the same time, I hate the idea that students don't do something because they think they won't be able to manage it. They don't think they can try it. I used to teach a lot of first-year students at Dartmouth. And I remember going into the classes and they thought they knew everything because they had been pushed since they were, that big. They had to get to an Ivy. They had to get there, no matter what. And they thought they knew everything. And now they were there, that self. They didn't want to try new things or other things. So I would just walk into class and say, okay, you spent your life getting here. You're here now. Let's roll up our sleeves and do some work and learn how to do something different. And they are used to being the best. They're used to being at the top of their class. They are used to being the ones who are always going to be the best at everything, just like I felt. And then they get there and they say, oh, but I actually don't know how to do this. And I said, well, this is what education is. This is what learning is. And don't be afraid. We'll get you there. We're in this together. If you can't do it, I've failed some way not to help you get there. But yes, you're totally right that lots of people don't have those options. So I've always been very careful to work closely with those students who think that how did I get here? Can I do this? Am I going to be all right? Nobody here looks like me. Nobody here comes from the kind of difficult background that I come from. So I think that's the other piece of it, is feeling, that I'm very lucky. I worked really hard. I did not come from a wealthy family. I did not come from private schools. I did not do anything. My father worked in a factory, and my mother was a social worker. And I want to say, we just work hard. We work hard, but I want you to have the best life that you can have. That was a digression, but I think we got there.
Yeah, no, I think the fact that many of us have options, like I said, is a privileged position. So,
Absolutely.
I try to tell myself when I feel lost about all these options that I have is, this is a good problem to have in a way, because many people would love to have this problem, but quote unquote problem, but they don't. So I think cherishing the opportunity and figuring out the best way to proceed, I think is probably the most respectful way to enjoy this privilege that we get to have.
I think the big problem is the fear that if you fail at something that means so much to more than just you, to your family, to others, the fear is that if you fail, you have failed your family. You haven't just failed yourself. You failed all the people who had faith or belief in you or helped you to get where you are. And that's a hard one. That's a hard one to deal with.
Absolutely.
And it's a compromise, right? It's a compromise between, really making everybody proud, but also really listening to yourself, to what you really want and what you can actually do. Yeah. Because if we really push ourselves too much, especially if we don't do it because of this internal call that we really were born to do that, but because we need to please somebody, it's very, very hard. But you brought the family into the bigger scheme, and I think it's a very important aspect of basically life and choices, etc. And I think the support that can come from there is also something extremely valuable and something that we should all recognize. Like in general, the support of the people that love us and the community we belong, the community not just that we were born with, but also that we create, can have a very impactful can have a very high impact in our life and our choices. So that's also why communities like Fail that we really believe in can do something good, because we know how much they can affect the choices of each people and how much they can support them when they really need the support. So yeah.
I think you raised a really good
sorry.
point when you said the community you make. And I think that's a really special and important thing that you just said. The Fail community is all part of this too. Yeah.
Exactly. So we can understand. And so something, Gretchen, that I really wanted to ask you, like we already said, you're also, besides being an academic, you're also a writer. So you wrote 10 books, and you said that your writing is inspired by the stories of so many great people who crossed boundaries of history, time, place, or race. Okay. And when I read that, I felt so much connected to that sentence, because we believe in this format that role models and people that did something great in life can inspire others to do the same or to do even better. Again, create these communities, but not just like also do better for themselves. So something that I'm extremely curious to ask you is like how, the life of your role models changed your lives, as we're trying to do with Failure for ourselves and for the writing of your books.
Yeah. So that's an interesting thing, because there's a story about biographers, which is that at some point in the writing of the life or the researching or the writing of it, you actually stop liking the person you're writing about. And partly because you find out more about them than you wanted to know. You dig into letters that they never thought that somebody would be reading. But there were times when you feel so invested in those lives and you take lessons away from it. The first biography I wrote was about a woman named Dora Carrington. She was part of the Bloomsbury group, Lytton Strachey, Virginia Woolf, all those people. And she was very shy, and she was a painter, and she hid her work away. And sometimes that she would even turn paintings facing the wall so people wouldn't see them. And others didn't really take her work seriously. And I took a lot away from that, because she threw her life into the hands of a man who was a homosexual, but she lived with him for many years. They shared a home, and she made a home. And he became famous. And yet I thought, oh, come on, you can show your pictures some places. And I spent years thinking that he held her back. And then I found a letter that said, let me build you a studio. I'm making some money now. And I thought, okay, well, that's the lesson I learned from that one, is not to be shy, but to let other people help you if they offer that help. So, I did a number of books. One of them was the biography of Frances Hodgson Burnett. She wrote The Secret Garden and a number of other books. And she had a really interesting life. She was really famous. She was well known. She traveled a lot. She had kids, but she made a lot of mistakes in her life, and she pushed herself really hard. So she spent a lot of bedridden years because she was working so hard. And I started telling myself, see, this is what happens. This is what happens when you do that. But I think for role models, they weren't necessarily the people I was writing about. I wrote about their lives because I found it fascinating. How does a person go from being, Burnett was English and then moved to America at 15? How does she go from being one to the other? How did Carrington go from being, being born in the Victorian period and growing up in the Jazz age and suddenly chopping off her hair and becoming an artist? That's fascinating to me. And then I write biographies of other people, and two of them were in one of the books I wrote. They were just incredible. Lucy Terry is known as the first African-American poet, even ahead of Phyllis Wheatley, and her husband, Abijah Prince. And they were enslaved people in Deerfield, Massachusetts. And they married. He freed himself, and then he helped free her. She became known. They took cases to court. They were about to lose their land. They went to court. They survived. And it was incredible. And I thought, well, these are people I really need to write about, because it was in the 18th century. I mean, he was contemporaneous with Benjamin Franklin. You know, how do people go from slavery to freedom to agency? I mean, to say to his wife, we are going to court and we're going to sue these people. And they did. People retaliated. They had problems, but they were also much loved. And then 2 years into researching their story, I started recognizing names. I was looking at the names of the family that owned Abijah Prince in Connecticut. And he had been at Yale, and then they moved to Massachusetts and took this boy with them. And then he didn't get free till he was in his 50s, which is an incredible thing. But I was totally taken with these people. So I started seeing these names and the people who owned them. And I called my mother, who was a genealogist, and I said, these names were looking familiar. And she said, oh, don't get your hopes up. So she pulls out all of her research, rooms and binders and stuff. And we go down the list. And sure enough, I'm descended from the people, the family that owned Abijah Prince. So people said to me, you must be so proud to be descended from Abijah Prince. And I said, not my side. I said, that was the white side of the family. It wasn't this at all. And people couldn't get their heads. I told them, and it was like going to dinner and you go and sit down at the table and then you realize you're in the wrong house. And I thought, I learned so much from these people. I learned a resilience. I learned, and now if people can grow up as enslaved people and then get their freedom and make sure their sons and daughters are free and in history, they have no idea that I exist, that this story changed me. But it was so moving, so exciting to find these people. I found their cellar hole. My husband helped me with the research, and we would go sit in their cellar hole and just kind of commune with them and say, okay, you did this incredible thing 200 years ago, and now I'm going to tell your story.
That's fantastic. I think it's great to see how much, people can inspire you and can change you, even if, from 200 years ago. I think it's amazing. Yeah. And it's the same for us. Like, we really hope to achieve the same type of results by changing so many people's lives through their stories, right? And so how much great stuff they did in their lives. So yeah, it's just
and you
lovely.
don't know. You may never know. Those people
Absolutely.
will never know I exist. But the students, the people you interact with, your colleagues, your community, you may never know that you influenced them in some way and that you did something that made them think, maybe I can do that too. It's really, the unknowingness of it is kind of wonderful, I think, that you have an influence. Your succeeding past failure can inspire other people, and you may never know about that.
Yeah, like I remember once you said that, when actually you realize that one of your books or something that you wrote impact, one of your students, on somebody that tells you, actually, what I wrote, what I read there changed my life and really helped me. That's really when, the circle closes for you and you say, oh, actually, all this effort that I put and all the time that I waited from the moment that, I threw the message out there for people to read, for people, when I felt it was ready, which could be after years of hard work, and you feel like finally it's ready, it's out there, people have the time to digest it, you're waiting patiently, and then it gets to the final impact, and somebody, calls you or writes you, and then you say, oh, that it really helped me and impacted me. So this must be the best day of your life, I guess. And it's over and over again.
Amazing. Yeah, I hope all this happens to you and all the people who are listening to this too, because, you're just sort of working away in your little room. You're writing, you're doing whatever you do, and you're thinking, maybe I can finish this, maybe I can get through it. And then suddenly, was it Ben Jonson, Shakespeare? One of them finished a writing and then said, go gently, little book, because you're going to fly out into the world and you don't know what you're going to encounter. And people will know your work. They may not know you, but they'll know you succeeded at something. Yeah. That's
and
nice.
the hidden, influence is one of the reasons that we're doing the Fail Initiative. We are hosting these talks, and with the hope that someone will pick it up and find it helpful. And though we may never know exactly how we influenced others, there's certainly the effect that today you, Gretchen, tell the story that may have an impact on someone who sees something in themselves that are comparable to what you've gone through, and then therefore you've inspired that individual. We've had students running into us in the hallway, and they ask, are you the fail people? We're like, yeah, we're the people doing fail. And they started telling us how meaningful some of the talks are, and how they felt so relieved to hear about the failures and the moments when things don't go well enough for the well-established professionals, because usually we're well together. So the impact is definitely one of the main reasons why that's driving us to keep doing this even in the age of pandemics.
And Gretchen, can you imagine how hard it's going to be to find a job for us that people associate us with being the people of fail, like the fail? Like we basically, like, this is a complete career suicide here. Like,
no. But I will say that I thought Richard said that people stopped him and said, "Are you the failed people?"
Exactly. But that's the power of two letters, right? Like, change everything. And but then you try to explain them. You're not the failed people, but the failed people, and it's very hard to get there. It's fine. It's fine.
I think it's a big distinction. And the thing about failure is you think you're alone.
Yes.
You think that you failed by yourself, that you are alone. It's nice to know that I've known a lot of really well-known people in my life. And often I'm just amazed when they tell me stories about the hardships or the failures that they've had, the editors who wouldn't publish their books, or the reviewers who said terrible things to them, or, all of those things in life that they thought that I would never have imagined, because I see them as being so successful. But, you're just like the rest of us. I think that's the important thing, is that we all of us have some kind of point in our lives where we messed up, we failed at something, and then we are not alone. I think the failed community is a lot larger than people think.
Absolutely. And like you said, everyone has moments in life where he or she just feels like, this is the end of my life, or how do I unplug myself from all of this mess? And you certainly mentioned it in your story when you didn't pass your qualifying exam for the first time, or when you first came to Stanford University, where you don't feel like you belong there. So the feeling of being stuck in life, I guess it's very common after major failures, or after one makes the adjustment, one moves to a new city, or one makes the adjustment to a new habit. So how do people, in the long term, 20, 30 years, you feel just fine, you feel like it's just a small incident, but at the moment, how do people unstuck themselves? If that question makes sense.
I do understand the question, and it's hard. I mean, I have many years of perspective on that particular failure, but at the moment, I could not see past it. I couldn't see that there was like another week or another month or another year, even though they told me you were allowed to take it again, when you're calmed down. I was actually just terrified. I was so nervous and I was so scared, and there was not a surprise that I didn't do well at all. And it was oral. So I was faced this panel in front of the room, and I just kind of collapsed. And I thought, how do I live that down? I think the worst part was thinking, how do I go back and face the people or my friends who say, how did it go? How do I do that? There was a sense of shame that I think was misplaced. And I think that's the first thing you do, is this is not shameful. You tried something, it didn't go well. Okay, take a breath, feel bad, cry a little bit, and then say, okay, what's next? What's the next thing I have to do? And the next thing I might have to do is to move somewhere else, or to take the exam again, or in my case, write the book 4 more times. there is another step. There's always the next thing. It's not a stop. That failure is not the end of things. It's the beginning of the next step you have to take.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
it's very important to acknowledge that. I want to just to highlight what you just said. It's very important to acknowledge that it's not the end, and it's just the beginning of something else. But as many people say, and it sounds like a cliche, but it's so true. Like, you need to learn how to get up. Like, life is all about getting up again and again from so many things that happen to you, and it's just so important. It's just so important to find the strength and find that motivation that can come from many different places and many different ways.
Yeah.
And I think for me, in many cases, when things didn't go well the way that I imagined, looking back, like, I feel like the failures are just reorienting myself towards something that eventually work even better than the ideal option that I had initially conceived of. So whenever say an application got rejected, or whenever an exam didn't go well, that's not a failure. That's just a reorientation. That's how I try to think these days.
I think that's a good thing, and that doesn't ever end. I mean, the thing is, anytime you put yourself out there, you're taking that chance. I applied for 3 grants this year, and I didn't get any of them. So it doesn't, like, oh, okay, what next? What do I have to do now? And I think that doesn't stop. It doesn't stop, but it's not the end of something. I mean, maybe something better. I didn't get the grant, but I got a book contract for the same project. Maybe something else. I don't know if people believe in this, but sometimes people always say, it wasn't meant to be. If it didn't happen, I don't know about that. I wouldn't go that far, because some things you don't do well at that you really, really wanted. But you have to adjust your thinking to say, what else would I like to do? What would give me some pleasure, joy, and satisfaction? If it's not this thing, what's the thing I can try now?
Yes, but when you said, like, don't get a grant or rewrite your stuff, it gave me very weird feelings in my back, because I hate rewriting things that didn't work. Didn't work the first time. Like, I really pray that papers go through, or grants just are accepted, because rewriting things for me is one of the hardest things in the world. I thought it was good, right? Why should I rewrite it again?
I know.
And getting your honest feedback is very hard. It's very hard. You know what I mean? Like, how do you make it better? Why they didn't like it? And it's like, there's so many factors there, but this is another conversation.
No, but I understand what you're saying, because, if I get rejected, I get book reviews that are bad, and that feels terrible. I've just stopped reading them. I'll let somebody else tell me, oh, you got a good one. Okay, I'll read that one. But otherwise, I don't want to know. And, maybe that's not the way to deal with it. But, I think, okay, what's the next book I want to do? Or, if they didn't want this one, what can I try now? And also, I think you have to be kind to yourself. I mean, that's the thing. That doesn't define who you are and what you're capable of. It just means that particular thing didn't work, right?
And you can never please everybody. This is something that everybody learns at some point. Yeah. And you never know who's going to judge your work. Like, it can't, like, the same work as, like, the reviewer process in academic papers is a perfect example. Yeah. You get 3-4 reviews back. 2 are amazing. 1 is mediocre. One thinks you suck. And it's like, who's right? Nobody. Right. Like, nobody and everybody. Maybe they have good reasons to think one thing, and they have good reasons to think the opposite. So at the end of the day, you cannot please everybody. So what I always tell everybody, also tell all the students that I interact with, and when they go for interviews, etc., just be yourself, who you truly are. If they reject you, they rejected your true self. If they get you, they get your true self, and you're gonna be comfortable with who you are in the work that you get. Like, because you can be yourself. If you fake it, if you pretend to be someone else, then you need to stick to it, because they hired you because how can you fake it for 10, 15 years, right? So it's like, it doesn't make any sense. Just be yourself. If they don't like you, they're not a good fit.
I've been turned down for jobs, and then later I was so glad I didn't get that job. because there was something not right about it, or it's the wrong place for me. The fit wasn't right for me. And I don't feel bad about it. At the moment, I might think, oh, I really wanted that. It was in a beautiful city or whatever it was. And then I find out that the department went under, or that they're having terrible financial problems, or that really was not the place for me, or somebody else got the job and hated it. Then I think, oh, okay, I dodged a bullet there.
And like Gretchen, around this aspect of getting a job, I think I'm extremely interested in your perspective here. So when you were, the chair of the department, it's a great position, but it also comes with a lot of responsibilities, right? So you were the first African-American woman to get that position. And there's a lot of pressure that comes from it as well, right? So and it's very important to understand that in that position, you can make choices, and you probably need to hire somebody, or you need to, make decisions that affect people in very different way. But around this idea of hiring people and assessing their value, okay? Yeah. So what I'm very interested in your opinion is, in a world where opportunities are not equally distributed among people, okay? And basically your CV and your achievements and your qualifications are affected by the fact that probably earlier you didn't have the same type of opportunity. What is the most fair way of assessing people's value? Putting all this information together, your qualifications, but also your past, where you come from, and basically the bias you were, how can I say? I don't find the word, but the bias that you had on yourself. Like, what is the most fair way to value and assess somebody?
So that's an interesting question, because in academia, we rarely make hires on our own. It's usually a group hire, vision, or a discussion that goes on. And sometimes you find yourself in a position to try to give the group a perspective about someone that they don't have necessarily. They may come in with biases. They may think that this person hasn't got the right background or the right fit. And partly you want to say, yes, but look at what else they have to offer. And I've done a lot of counseling and mentoring of people who are looking for jobs, and maybe not where I was in a position to hire, and to try to help them see what will really make them shine, what will make them move forward, and to really make sure that they don't feel that they are not worth something. Because the fact is, when you have 200, 300, 400 people applying for the same position, only one person is going to get it. That did not mean you failed. It just means that there were so many great people out there that they finally had to make a decision on one person. I've also been able to make hires on my own, not from other positions, and some of them I've been very proud of, to watch people flourish and to move on, or to recommend students who go on and do really good things that you knew they could do. The one thing about being in a position like being the first, nobody knew when I became the chair at Dartmouth, nobody knew that I was the first Black woman to chair an Ivy English department. And I think I mentioned it to a couple of people. I said, oh, did you happen to notice this? What do you think of that? And they said, huh. Yeah. But it does mean that people of color are, you're magnified. You're much more visible. I often was very careful to try to make decisions and to make arguments and to hold meetings, knowing that everyone is going to say, how is she going to handle this? Is she going to be biased? I would try to make sure I'm doing it by the book to always explain, but there was never a sense of that comfortable invisibility that can happen when you're in a different kind of position. I'm always visible. When I run a meeting, when I walk into a room, I'm visible in a way that others might not be. And you never lose that consciousness. It always, you feel like you're representing more than yourself. And that's a big thing. That's a big thing. So that's why it makes it doubly hard to be, not want to fail,
Yeah.
But to know that the things that might be granted to you are hopefully because you've done a good job. And if you fail, you just say, okay, well, that didn't work. Let's try this other thing. So, yeah, but it works on both sides.
Absolutely. And I think one of our previous speakers also talked about the extra burden of loans are being, one of the few kinds that you feel like you almost represent everyone in that comes with your background, and that the expectation is so high up there, and that certainly gives us lots of stresses and anxiety there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Gretchen, sorry, I need to say this. Like you made me think of a quote that I loved from The Great Gatsby, the book from Scott Fitzgerald, when it says like I love big parties because they're so intimate. Nobody knows you. Like you're invisible in big parties, and the bigger it is, the more intimate actually the party is, because nobody sees you. I think but you felt in a very small party, let's say, when everybody could see you and recognize you. Sorry,
it's true, but it's a good thing too. My mother used to always tell me, you like to be a big fish in a small pond, not to be in a great big pond. And it works both ways, because then you're more capable of making friends and finding your people in a small group.
Yeah,
so that's
and finding your community too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. So Gretchen, as we are coming close to the hour, just want to ask on behalf of the audience, what are some of the ways that first of all, what are some of the ways that people can follow your work? I wonder if you can share with the audience what you care about the most among the many things that's in your life. Is it work? Is it family, friends? And any insight you want to share there?
That's a big one too. You keep asking big questions.
Why are we here?
That's right. What is the meaning of life? I think I couldn't be myself without my work. My work has meant so much to me, and I've able to push myself to do things that I never might have thought I could do. But having said that, family, especially nowadays, has become really, really central to me. I have to say that my family take great pride in my success, and that helps too. And that's a wonderful thing. So I will, unlike your audience, I have grandchildren now. I have 3 grandchildren, and I look at them and I think, okay, lovely. I want them to know that they can do some things that they would love to do too, and they shouldn't be afraid to try. Yeah. So yeah. I'm just glad lovely. To have had the chance to do it all.
Yeah.
Yeah, and thank you so much also for doing this, like to taking another chance and talking about your story in a very transparent and honest way with all of us. We really appreciated having you here today. And I think for me, it was an amazing experience. I had a lot of fun. We should definitely follow up from this. And
yes, we'll meet in person one day.
One day.
In one country and another. Yeah. Exactly. It was nice to talk to you, Richard, and to you, Francesco. It was great. Thank you so much for the chance to do this.
Thank you so much to you. And for everybody that is watching, like, we invite all of you to, follow us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, YouTube. We have a channel where you can interact with so many talks, so many inspiring content. And please make sure to connect with us, because we want to see you around. And we also have another event coming up in 2 weeks. The next guest that we have is Matt Abrahams, and is a passionate, innovative educator. He's a lecturer at Stanford, and he does something extremely cool. That is like teaching people how to speak up without freaking out. So his whole career is around teaching people how to speak in public and he created a whole method around this, and we will have a lot of fun learning how we can be better at something that is so important as communication, but that is at the same time so scary. So make sure not to miss it. Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Gretchen, thank you, Richard, and see you next time.
All right.